Hi everyone, I'm Melita Emanuel-Carr, professional basketball player. I have Robin here with me, and today we're going to be talking about basketball injuries and how we can kind of adapt ourselves and kind of just learn basically about the body. So could you introduce yourself a little bit, Robin, please?
Yeah, of course I will. Yeah, my name's Robin Lansman. I've been an osteopath for quite a number of years and taught sports injuries and rehabilitation in the UK and abroad. And it's a great opportunity to discuss injuries and timeouts, because obviously at the moment, especially, people are timing out because there's no chance to play as much as there were. So it's a good time to actually start thinking about these questions. I should point out there's a few questions you're posing. The general answers concerning basketball, hopefully for that interest group, but actually you've got to be careful just that these are not specific or bespoke answers, because people need to seek, advice. Happy to help, but on an individual basis, I think is the safest option. So just to clarify that, yeah. So go ahead, give me a question.
Okay, so one thing I've noticed is that nearly every basketball player has rolled their ankle or sprained their ankle. And we're always told to give it extra protection. However, sometimes I think that limits us when we play. So what is your suggestion on that in terms of giving our ankles extra protection?
It's true to say that, the statistics do say that ankles and feet are the worst injury cases for basketball, so that's fairly clear. The thing about the boots and the support lower down, reaching a certain point in the ankle, that's going to give a bracing and support and cushioning. The way your body's landing at speed means your muscles need to be adaptable, they need to be flexible and strong, and sometimes the emphasis is placed on strength over the other two. So the adaptability of the muscle and of the joint is really important. It's not so much the joint that can adapt, actually, it's the muscle function that needs to work in all three planes of movement almost all of the time, just in case. So a lot of this is about the training, and emphasizing only one or two muscle groups can actually limit you, especially if that training is looking not in a functional way, which means in all 3D planes, but much more in in two planes or a single plane. So the advice is going to be, prevention is going to come down to getting the whole limb up to the hip and back, working in harmony properly, and getting that flow of movement both upwards and downwards through the body. A lot of people think, the power comes from, let's say, the top down, but actually the way you take impact has got to be dissipated or spread out through the limb going back upwards. So if there's stiffness in the hips or back or knees, your legs and feet and ankles are going to be under a great deal more pressure than they should be. And I think the emphasis, the fear going to be the area of the ankle being the biggest risk, might mean a lot of the strength goes into areas around that, and indeed the bracing and support over perhaps protecting at certain points that particular area. So you want to try and actually train so that you're, as I say, dissipating forces and making the tension, if you like, work out higher up your limb and into your back as well. And to me, that's a safer option. I'm not sure if that answers the question fully, but I hope it goes some way towards it.
Yeah, just to add to that question, so when I was in America, we was forced to wear either ankle braces or get taped before practice and games. What is the difference between the two? Because for me, I prefer taping because it's a lot looser, and I feel like my ankle can still move. But with the ankle brace, I feel like I'm more secure. So
there's a big difference, and you can't have both. The point is that the ankle brace is inhibiting function and perhaps overprotecting at certain points unless you have an injury. The taping can be useful because it acts as a reminder, and it teaches your body to get to know itself a little bit better with a slight level of protection. The term proprioception, are you familiar with that?
Not really, and just for anyone anyway who may not.
Okay, well, so the term proprioception is really that your brain and spinal cord have to know in space where your limb is, and not only where your limb is, but actually how your joints are working on a detailed level. And that feedback that goes between the joint and the rest of you only works properly in an unstrapped or unbraced form. And if you basically brace everything, you completely change that feedback loop. You distort it, actually. So if you wear the brace too much of the time, for example, in training, then obviously you're not getting your brain used to where your limb is and how it's working, so you lose that ability. So the difficulty is obviously if you're already injured, you may want to brace if you are going to play, and definitely plan to play. When you're actually competing at the highest level of performance, I can see why some coaches may suggest the bracing option just to keep you all safe. But as you say, you can't play as well. You can't feel the game in the same way as you could if you're not wearing, not either wearing anything or at least a looser taping. But as I say, there's no perfect solution. But going back to the answer to the previous question, spreading loading and working out in slightly different ways to get activation of muscle groups further up the limb and even onto the opposite side, so you're sharing load and transferring weight differently. That would be my way to develop the training. It's slightly different when it's already happened and you've injured yourself, but the long strategy is still to go back to that, sharing the weight and distribution of forces. Okay,
thank you. To go on to like another big injury in basketball, the ACL is something that any athlete does not want to hear. But what's the best way to deal with it? Because right now I have a tear ACL, and I've kind of had two different opinions from different people. So the first one is to get surgery straight away, and then you can start the recovery process. And then the second is to wait until you've built up all your muscles again and then have the surgery. So which is the best way?
Just to clarify, I mean, there's a tear and there's a rupture. So you can actually basically tear some fibers in the midsection or at the lower end of or upper end of the ACL, the ligament that's holding the knee braced, in a sense. It's a common one to hurt. It's a common one to injure. It can just be in pain. It can be torn a bit. It can be fully ruptured. And the stability obviously gets more and more compromised when it's fully ruptured. So the thing is that many people have waited quite a time before they even think about surgery. So they've lost fitness and they've lost strength. So the situation mostly these days is people talk about prehabilitation, not rehabilitation, prehabilitation. So even someone who's pretty fit and able, it's getting the muscles around, and again, going back to the answer to the previous question, really, getting the muscles working in bigger groups around the whole area, not just focusing only on the knee and only on the thigh muscles. And even, as I say, working out the opposite side as well, hip, thigh, knee, back, so that you're actually, again, helping the recovery process. Because post-surgery, should you go for the surgery, after that surgery, you're still going to be in a recovery phase, walking pretty badly for a little while till you actually, start to get your strength and abilities back. So you want to keep everything over a broad base activated and working out. It doesn't mean very heavy duty exercise. Possibly not weight-bearing exercise, possibly swimming, possibly other things where you're actually working muscles in bigger groups, but avoiding more strain and more compression on the area that's been injured. Okay. I think that helps as well. I mean, there's lots of ways in, but that would be my general experience to share that sort of answer.
Okay. Lastly, do ice baths actually work? Because as a player, we've always been forced to take ice baths. Sometimes I feel like this is pointless. Other times, I don't know if it's just mentally, I'm thinking, yeah, it's actually working, so it works. And if it does actually work, how long should we take them for?
Let me go back to some of the words you were using in your question, this one and a previous one or two. You've used the word force a few times, which to me means you're being persuaded very strongly by people who hopefully are looking out for you to get you to do things which they think and believe and hope do actually help. So, but nevertheless, the word force does feel a little bit that the understanding has not been shared fully with the athlete, including yourself. So the point about it, there is research that says, recovery is quicker with ice bathing for marathon runners and all sorts of sports people to get their muscles that have become inflamed and activated by the exercise globally to calm down, to replenish, and to sort of heal, in a sense, post-exercise, especially high-level exercise. The downside is it's not very pleasant, and you've got to know that you're actually getting a benefit. Otherwise, why put yourself through it? So there are certainly localized areas where you could put ice, which might be a bit more easy to handle. But you don't want to freeze yourself, because literally you will damage tissues if you go too cold for too long. So contrast bathing in areas, now that doesn't mean jumping in a hot bath and cold bath, but it does mean using bigger ice and heat packs to warm and cool in alternations muscles, gets the muscles pumping and cleaning themselves out of what builds up during high level sport. And what you want to make sure is when you finish sport is it's not about just relaxing the muscle. It's understanding that muscle relaxation is an active process. In other words, it needs blood flow and it needs nutrients to actually switch the muscle off again as much as it did to get it firing hard. Okay. Now, when it's all choked up post-exercise, the muscle, it still needs those nutrients and blood flow to wash it through and get it to actively relax. Okay, so it's not a passive non-process. It actually is a process you have to do. So that contrast bathing, in my experience, is good to stimulate that clean out of the tissues. So when you finally let them switch off the muscles sometime later, they're actually, ready to relax properly and in a healthy way. And they don't build up then between exercise. Let's say if you're training today and tomorrow or the next 3 days, you're not building up problems day on day as much as you would if you just left them to passively relax. Yeah.
Okay.
So a little bit of gentle exercise and mobilization with the ice and heat combinations, to my mind, is a kind of slightly gentler and less forced way to achieve some change and improvement in your performance overall and not build up problems.
Yeah.
So I hope that's helpful
Yeah, that
and
definitely
slightly less unpleasant way to deal with it, perhaps.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question.
Sure.
And it's about the off season. So depending on where you are, where you're playing, the off season can last for about 2 to 4 months before we then have to go to pre-season. Which is the best way to rest our bodies? Because some people might straight after the season go on holiday. Some people train really, really hard for the next season. But in terms of resting, how should we kind of rest our body?
A little bit of rest and downtime is a good idea. Doing nothing at all is the opposite extreme. So you need to keep things ticking over, and you need to think of variety and cross training. Yeah. So doing slightly different things, not extreme different things, but it's a matter of actually finding a balance where you enjoy something that gives some stimulation to the muscle. Something global, like swimming is good. Something where you're putting slightly less pressure on the joints that take the most pressure. So lots of weight-bearing exercise, might be not so helpful, but keeping globally fit. So using, for example, bands, pulleys, if you go into the gym, not doing necessarily high weight-bearing exercises, say like overhead weights where you're actually squatting hard, because again, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the knees and ankles, which again is an area you're putting a lot of pressure on. So, you can do unweighted squats. You can modify things. So you're still doing reps, but you're not doing as heavy weight exercise. You can do that gently daily. So there's always something you could do, but you're not trying to, in a sense, switch off completely. I think though for the mind, possibly, that's why it's important to have a break mentally, because it's a hard game to focus on, not just basketball, but lots of games are very intense and the pressure is there. So mentally, I think the other part is doing different things to get your mind to relax as well and have a little bit of mind time out as well as body time out. So it's a bit of a balance of the two, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer some questions? I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, if anyone does need help, we're here to help. And obviously, I think it's important to make care individual. So again, just to repeat, I think it's really important, although we're talking, in general terms, they're probably quite common to many people, but everyone is different. And that's, how I like to keep it, is in individual care. Otherwise, I think, generalities is where it goes wrong, and things become like force, like you were talking about. They become, because they're not fully understood or fully explained. And I think that's really, really important in sports care management, really, sports injury management and rehab.
Yeah.